2021 sucked for music. Black Country New Road? More like Bad Crunchy Poo Road. Can't spell Black Midi without mid. Call me if you get lost. I don't think I will. I would rather stay lost. Volcanic Bird Enemy and the Voice Concern. Yeah, I want a voice concern for anyone who likes this album. Red Taylor's version? I guess Kanye made her famous because she stole his idea of dropping the same album over and over again. A Beginner's Mind, more like a beginner's album. This random guy that nobody's ever heard of before thinks he can just hop onto a few lists at the end of the year because he made an album with Angelo D'Agostino. Smiling with No Teeth. Well, the title is half accurate because I'm certainly not smiling, but I would rather have all of my teeth pulled than listen to it again. Hey, what? Yeah, what? What's the point of this album? Godspeed, more like God's P. Oh, wait, that's already. Hey, Adele, Danny Brown called and he wants his album title back. What, Pharoah Sanders dropped an album this year? Isn't that guy like 3,000 years old? A gift to us all. Yeah. Speak for yourself, please. Sour, I hardly know her. Also, I don't care enough about 14-year-old Playhouse Disney plants to have actually listened to this. An Evening with Silk Sonic, more like an evening with Target commercial music. Sometimes I might be introvert. That one was pretty good, actually. In fact, there's exactly 12 albums that dropped this year that I thought were pretty decent. Here we go, number 12. On January 1st, 2021, the legendary vaporwave trio Death's Dynamic Shroud dropped Yellow Flower Lost to their New World Mixtape Club on Bandcamp. While the group isn't really delving into any territory that they haven't before, they prove that they're still absolute masters of putting samples through an emotional meat grinder that'll make you think of the Go-Gurt commercial that was playing while you were 7 and found out your hamster died. The genre is over a decade old at this point, and these guys are still able to make music that sounds refreshing despite not straying too far from its roots of slowing down retro song samples and giving them new life. For example, the track Drying the Petals takes Bryan Adams' Do I Have to Say the Words and enhances the emotions of the original song by making it sound like an I Spy page. Hell, I don't even know what song is being sampled on, but that track quickly builds into a humongous stadium anthem that the Weeknd's Super Bowl performance only wishes it could compete with. It's a damn great record, and I hope they're able to follow it up with something cool. On February 1st, 2021, the legendary vaporwave trio Death's Dynamic Shroud dropped Endless to their New World Mixtape Club on Bandcamp. Now, the cover art here bears a striking resemblance to their 2014 sextuplet album Derelict, and I think the tracklist does too, but the Google Translate camera isn't the most reliable thing in the world. The full title of this record is actually Endless Megatower 1, further connecting it to Derelict, because each disc on that album is a separate Megatower. Perhaps there'll eventually be other Megatowers released in this style that'll act as a full-blown spiritual successor at some point. Who knows? Anyway, while I enjoyed Derelict from the couple of times that I heard it, it's not a record that I'm super familiar with from them, so I'm gonna be looking at Endless more as its own entity for the time being. The record has a perfect balance of the glitchy experimentation we've come to expect from Death's Dynamic Shroud, and the beautiful ambience coming from unexpected samples that we've also come to expect from Death's Dynamic Shroud. It sounds like it could be a soundtrack to an indie platformer racing rhythm puzzle RPG, with its captivating ambience on REM's Journal and Architect Hunter 3, and irresistibly catchy sample flips on A New Team and Spirit of Duty. It has a little something for everyone, and proves that vaporwave still has more to say and room to grow even after all these years. On March 1st, 2021, the legendary vaporwave trio Death's Dynamic Shroud dropped Athletics to their New World Mixtape Club on Bandcamp, and it was okay, I guess. On April 1st, 2021, it was April Fool's Day. The Fool sees Blade expanding upon the trance-infused dance pop that he dabbled in on his 2020 collaborative project with Megatower, while still incorporating his cloud rap roots. For the first time, it sounds like Blade is using autotune to sound more like the chipper frontman of a one-hit wonder Europop group than an empty pit of sadness, which is probably why all of the non-drainers liked this one. Hell, even the sadder songs like Desire and Wet Water 2 give off a more cheesy, ballady vibe, with lyrics that are surprisingly poetic to boot. The prominent mixing of trap hi-hats make a lot of these songs sound like something off of Ice Dancer, but stand out thanks to those trance sounds. Cuts like Baby and The Nine Is Up have some of the hardest beats that Blade has ever performed over, and the whole drained aesthetic isn't sacrificed at all in the process. It's like listening to a DJ set at a wedding reception, only the marriage is between two DeviantArt drawings of a Chow and Hello Kitty OC, and the DJ looks like that bear from Danganronpa. I love how that choppy vocal melody on I Want It That Way plays off of those bittersweet keys, and how the album in general doesn't lose any of its momentum album when it decides to go for a slow jam. Hotel Breakfast has maybe the funniest lyrics that I've ever heard on a Blade song, and Tyboy Digital is sounding meaner and hungrier than ever on Inspiration Comes. As soon as the album ends, I'm instantly ready to hit the replay button and hear those hard-ass synths on the intro to get me pumped up to listen to it again. It's a super quick listen and probably one of the easiest projects in the Drain Gang canon to recommend to newcomers, while still being refreshing for longtime fans. Guys, I know that Whole Lotta Red technically came out in 2020, but last year I made my year-end list too soon because it was at the end of September and the new Tory Lanez album came out, and I knew that was album of the year, so I had to make my list right then and there, but that means I didn't get to talk about Whole Lotta Red, so I'm just gonna put it on this list. On June 1st, 2021, the legendary vaporwave trio Death's Dynamic Shroud didn't drop really from self-titled to their New World Mixtape Club on Bandcamp. This is a Midwest emo band that has a whole-ass high school marching symphony to emphasize how fucked up their wet dreams are. The technicality of the instrumentation here goes far beyond the usual Midwest math rock shtick, with these lush brass sections that are beautifully complemented by the jittery guitars. I know Really From aren't the first band to do this, but on this LP they're able to maintain the bittersweet melancholy very effectively for the entire 34-minute runtime. What also helps it stand out are the vocals from Michi Tassi, whose soulful voice gives these songs a completely different vibe from most of the genre. It sounds like she's using music to filter her own sadness into something that she can make sense of, rather than a coping mechanism that's more blunt and raw. Tracks like Yellow Fever and I Live Here Now are great examples of this, as they sound huge and elaborate without sacrificing any of the emotion. There's some male vocals on here too, but they kind of suck. I'd highly recommend checking this out if you're a fan of Midwest emo or just want to hear something refreshing. 8 days before July 1st, 2021, the Sonic the Hedgehog YouTube channel uploaded the Sonic 30th Anniversary Symphony
to their New World Mixtape Club on Bandcamp.
There is in fact an album version of it that you can stream, and it is one of my favorite things to come out of the year. If everyone is allowed to put that Shoo Shoo Twin Peaks cover album in their 2016 list, then I am allowed to do this. It's no secret that I'm a bit of a strumpet for video game music, and hearing tracks from nearly every Sonic game rearranged into huge orchestral pieces was enough to make my tiny heart grow 3 sizes that day. Also, how can you not laugh your ass off when watching this huge orchestra play in front of a screen showing footage from games like Sonic R and Sonic 06, while playing genuinely fantastic renditions of the music from them? Well, some of the more recent Sonic games, like Unleashed and Lost World, already have a lot of orchestral stuff in their soundtracks, making some of the covers not too much to write home about. Older, and especially more obscure titles, like the Game Gear and Sega Saturn medleys, are genuinely magical experiences. It makes me so happy that we live in a timeline where something like this is possible for something like this. It is a shame that we only got a couple of songs from Sonic Adventure 1 instead of a full-blown Dreamcast medley, as I would have loved to have heard an orchestral version of Escape from the City, but hey, at least we got the Chow Garden theme for the intermission. Wait, intermission? They pretty much already covered the entire series. What could they possibly do next? Oh my god! The second half of this record is pretty much just a bunch of live covers of vocal tracks from Sonic games, and they kick so much ass. That keyboard riff on Reach for the Stars immediately sets the tone for how these songs are able to sound more lively and visceral when played in this way. Endless Possibility is enhanced greatly by these backing orchestral sounds, and is held together beautifully with vocals from Nate Wants to Battle. The cover of Escape from the City sounds much larger too, and made me realize that the song has a weird ska punk rhythm in the verses. Admittedly, most of the Crush 40 songs don't sound that different from other live performances that they've already given to these tracks, and I wish they took advantage of a larger instrumental palette like some of these other covers. Hell, they actually do on Live and Learn, and it works so well that I wish they just did that for every single song that they performed. Anyway, I don't know how heavily I would recommend this to those who aren't already fans of Sonic music, and those who are have probably heard it already, so I guess I just wasted my time talking about it. What you just heard was an excerpt of my album of the year last year, Black Heart by Rodeo Glow, a record so mind-bogglingly ahead of its time that nobody really knows what genre to even put it under. The most common thing that I've heard people call it is YouTube poop rap, which is still a better name than digicore. I bring this up to say that an artist by the name of, I don't really know how to pronounce.
I might love you so much, rapper. I love you so much, the rapper. Illusum, I don't care what you call me, however you pronounce it. fuck it, like.
Oh, thanks. An artist by the name of Illisum dropped an album called YTP Rap Aesthetics, and every second of it lives up to the title. Much like actual YouTube poops, it comes across as a very high-effort shitpost that wraps back around into a genuinely compelling piece of art. Despite the comparison I just made to Rodeo Glow, these two sound completely different from each other, despite both falling under the umbrella of YouTube poop rap. Whereas that album got its reputation from how the glitchiness and repetition of the vocals played off of the left field production, Illisum is way more direct and opts to be as in-your-face and abrasive as possible, both musically and vocally. Each track is like a 1 to 2 minute adrenaline shot that makes the project hard-hitting without overstaying its welcome, and there's even a few memorable hooks thrown into the mix. The lyrics are constantly referencing memes and internet culture, and while that usually comes across as annoying and ultimately dates the record, it's delivered with so much aggression that it feels more like a commentary on how the internet has warped our perceptions of the world, and not just, lol random, I go on Reddit too guys, aren't I cool? I remember when everyone was saying that JPEG Mafia's Veteran was the soundtrack to scrolling through online forums, and if that's the case, then this album's the soundtrack to scrolling through heated arguments in YouTube comment sections over a song from Paper Mario. This album is still probably going to come across as obnoxious to a lot of you, but I've always had a great time listening to it, and the only complaint that I have is that it isn't by Death's Dynamic Shroud. Speaking of JPEG Mafia, 2021 was the year that copying Playboi Carti's baby voice shtick was a financially viable option. Thankfully, there was one artist who was able to take this sound in a compelling and unique direction who actually put out an album in 2021. Slime Koro by Frogman might wear its vocal influences pretty heavily on its sleeve, but pretty much everything else about the record makes that easy to forget. The album has the same energy as the Katamari Damacy soundtrack, only converted into a poppy cloud rap album. All over this thing are sugary, adorable synths that add a lot of depth to the trap-inspired rhythms, and play off of the vocals in a way that feels nostalgic, yet modern at the same time. It's like if Parappa the Rapper started drinking lean. Actually, I think there's a sample from that game in here somewhere. There's a surprising amount of variety within this sound too, with tracks like Listless and Konbini Mall Medley undergoing some pretty significant progressions, while being surrounded by the driving simplicity of Cute or the slowly building flavor. It's a tightly packed set of weird bangers that fulfills a very specific niche that I absolutely love. But it's still not as good as what dropped on September 1st, 2021 by the legendary Vaporwave trio. We've been kidding around a lot today, but I want to get serious for this next one. One of the best albums to come out of 2021 was the new Injury Reserve album, By the Time I Get to Phoenix, which is a heartbreaking tribute to Stepa J. Groggs, a member of the trio who unfortunately passed away very suddenly in June of 2020. It feels weird to just label this as some kind of abstract eulogy, as much of it was recorded and planned out while Groggs was still with us, and the overall tone of the record was largely inspired by everything going on in the world over the past couple of years, as well as the passing of Richie's stepfather. In this interview they gave with Fantano, they said the record still felt appropriate to finish and release after Groggs' passing, given the tone it already had, and the Bandcamp page says the album is dedicated to him, so take what you will with that information. It should probably go without saying at this point, but this album is so radically different from anything else the Injury Reserve has ever released. Hell, it doesn't really sound like anything that I've heard before. I know they toured with Slaus and Malone a couple of years ago, and maybe his production style, as well as the spoken word elements of Standing on the Corner, rubbed off on them a little, but even other hip-hop albums that fall under the 500 subgenres that people have thrown at this thing don't really do enough to sum up what the band was able to accomplish here. It's an absolute journey from front to back, starting with a short sample of a battle rap verse that sets the tone for a long-winded monologue from Richie that's performed over an instrumental with virtually no drumming or readable melody in sight. It eventually builds into this rhythmically captivating wall of noise with drumming from Morgan Simpson of Black Midi fame that perfectly sets the tone for everything to come. While the album is really catchy and has hooks and melodies that'll stick in your head long after you hear them, they're not presented in any kind of conventional way. Superman, that, despite following an ABA song structure, has a beat that sounds like it's going at 130 and 300 beats per minute at the same time, with vocals that are surprisingly smooth and able to cut through it to create a memorable hook. Footwork in a Forest Fire has this haunting and tribal instrumental, Yet Groggs and Richie are trading bars over it as if it's a standard rap beat, which is made more chilling by the apocalyptic lyrics. Top picks for you seems to be about the surreal nature of how a person's legacy can live on the internet, even though they're no longer with us. And Knees is a gorgeous celebration of Groggs' legacy, while still being a heart-wrenching goodbye. My favorite song on the album, and favorite closing track of the year, is By Storm, as it feels like the world has ended and I'm watching the credits roll. And this feeling is brought home perfectly by this hook from Richie. There's obviously a bunch of other great tracks that I didn't mention, but I truly don't know how much justice I can do this record by just talking about it, so please just go listen to it. On November 1st, 2021, the legendary vaporwave trio Death's Dynamic Shroud dropped Faith in Persona to their New World Mixtape Club on Bandcamp, and all joking aside, this is my actual album of the year. That isn't number one. Now, you've probably noticed that I keep referring to Death's Dynamic Shroud as a trio, but there's only 2 members performing in all of the footage that I'm using. That's because the 2 founding members, Tech Honors and James Webster, don't have the penis sizes to even stand up next to the 3rd member, Keith Rankin, better known as Giant Claw, who pretty much created this entire album, which got way more attention than anything else they released last year. In fact, this is probably their most talked about album since 2015's I'll Try Living Like This, which is now considered a classic in the vaporwave community. However, this album doesn't really have a vaporwave sound to it, at least not on the surface. It's more of a glitch pop type beat, but the overall ethos of taking samples and turning them into sounds that'll light up parts of your brain that you forgot were there is 100% intact. Many of the samples on this album come from mainstream pop artists like Taylor Swift, Demi Lovato, and Dua Lipa, just to name a few. All of these vocals and grooves are repurposed into these progressive bangers that sound huge and otherworldly. I guess there is a
utopian virtual
sound to a lot of these cuts, especially the title track and Pop Chin, but that only further adds to how transformed all of these modern pop songs are. I can't get enough of the funky and densely packed last minutes of the memory, or the epic Tears in Abyss that introduces the listener to this alternate universe of music in a fun yet daunting way. For as catchy as this album is, it still takes moments to remind you that it is a Death's Dynamic Shroud project, and we can't have one of those without at least 2 tracks that'll make you cry your guts out. But the way these slower cuts are placed only enhances the album's pacing, as they stand as some of my favorites on the project. That is with the exception of the 8th track, which is 75 seconds of literal silence, but apart from that, I don't really have any complaints with this album. What could possibly be better than Death's Dynamic Shroud? Well, nothing actually. I only planned these 11 slots and said 12 at the beginning so I could do that every month gag. Or did I?
One!
And the album in the top 2 that ain't number 2 goes to the most Zoomer album on this entire list. Maybe second most, actually. I know I've said before that I'm not the biggest fan of the hip newfangled music terms like hypercore and digipop, but there's one particular artist who's had these tags thrown at them that actually makes music with substance and feelings. They go by the name of Delete Zeke, and I first heard about them early in 2021 when they dropped a short little project called Teen Week under the name Hi Zoe, before the name changed on Apple Music. Later in the same year, however, they would drop a much longer and more ambitious project called Frailty that perfectly balances their glitchy abrasion with stripped back soulful songwriting. I still like Teen Week more. I undoubtedly listened to this more than any other record from this year, and as of right now, it's probably my favorite project in this style. It encompasses a wide array of emotions and soundscapes beautifully, making it feel much larger than the 8-track 25-minute runtime would have you believe. Every single song is like a different facet of teenage angst and insecurity, from the brilliant opener Let Down that spells everything out with a few alternating hooks and production that sounds angelic yet intentionally rough, to the closing track 17, which almost feels like a modern take on a 2000s pop punk song. The anxious yet euphoric banger Home Switcher is one of the catchiest songs of the year, and perfectly plays off of cuts like the abrasive drum and bass centric 52 Blue Mondays and the quietly intimate singer-songwriter track Cartridge. While I could see a lot of people finding the songwriting on this record corny, I think it does a perfect job of communicating the emotions that come with being a teenager who's trying to figure themselves out and spends most of their time escaping the world via the internet. It's brutally honest from front to back, and musically explores a wide variety of genres that have popped up over the past several years. It genuinely gives me more hope for music going into the future, and I hope this artist is able to see more success going forward. forward. They've already built up a pretty impressive catalog, putting out music under different names like Leroy and Hate Page, and I'm really happy to see all the attention that these projects have gotten already. And those are my favorite albums of 2021 that I got to hear in 2021. There's a ton of other albums that came out this year that I haven't heard yet, and I always end up changing my mind like 2 hours after these videos go up, so making these lists at the end of the year feels kind of pointless to me now. I think I'm gonna start doing what YMS does and make my lists years after the year is over once I feel like I've heard everything that I wanted to from a given year. So see ya in 2024. Maybe I'll finally talk about Cemetery, maybe. Bye! These albums were all pretty cool too.